Welcome to episode 28 of Leaders of Enchantment podcast. This episode is another one of our out-of-the-box episodes where we recorded in front of a live audience courtesy of Young Professionals of Albuquerque, or YPA. Keeping with this out-of-the-box theme, today's podcast guest is none other than yours truly, where the tables are turned and I am the one being interviewed courtesy of episode 3's guest, Adam Hammer, CEO of Roadrunner Venture Studio. Further, this episode ends with opening up the questions to members of our live audience. This was a fun event for everyone involved, and special thanks goes out to Cam Ward, who is part of my podcast team, Gabe Gallegos and Adam Beaterwolf from YPA, and of course, Adam Hammer for being such a good sport. I hope you enjoy this episode.
Guys, welcome to Roadrunner Venture Studios. Among being a company creation factory here at Roadrunner, we also get the privilege of being the setting where Doug generally records his podcast for Leaders of Enchantment. This is especially meaningful for me because I've been on that side of the table, and so I'm enjoying the opportunity to get to ask Doug some questions in the style that he's done with so many meaningful leaders here in New Mexico. We think a lot about entrepreneurs, and we think a lot about how to shape young professionals to come build companies and start pushing the boundaries here in New Mexico. And Doug, you're sort of the perfect person to talk a little bit about entrepreneurship, what led you there. I'm going to steal from your style here and try to keep this biographical. So tell us where this story begins. You are Mr. New Mexico. This podcast is in reference to the land of enchantment. But what brought you here? Why did your family come to New Mexico? And tell us about some of those early formative memories here.
Yeah. So, I'm an Albuquerque kid. So this is my hometown. Landed here, dad's side of the family. Probably similar story to a lot of you folks. Hispanic, so that's why I tan so nicely. And then mom's side of the story, interestingly, my grandfather, who I never met, passed away before I was born, took a job with the Bureau of Indian Affairs in the late 1960s and moved his whole family to really Navajo country. And then after he passed away, my grandmother moved to Albuquerque. My folks met at St. Pius. I think I was giving somebody a hard time about St. Pius, but my folks went there. I was born to my mom at a very young age. So she was 18, and I was born 1973. So what they did back in 1973 is they got married. And so my dad went into the military. We left for a couple years, went to actually Moffett Field, which is where NASA Ames is in Mountain View. And so my dad was stationed there, and then we came back when I was 2 or 3. I have no memory of California whatsoever. So my modern memory started right here in Albuquerque. And
tell us what, folks tell me often that Albuquerque has changed a lot.
Yeah.
But some things, as in New Mexico, have stayed the same.
Yep.
That's a motif about New Mexico that we'll talk about during this interview. But tell us what Albuquerque was like then.
It's funny because I posed that question to so many people who are older than me, because I genuinely want to know, wow, what was Albuquerque like in the 50s and 60s? Albuquerque was a cool town. It was very much a safe town. I don't remember anything unsafe at all about Albuquerque. And this is growing up, and I kind of bounced around all over just because, to fast forward, parents get back from my dad being in the military, and they got divorced because probably got married too young because they had a kid. And so, mom and dad kind of bouncing around and mom moving around. And so I kind of grew up all over this city, and even including Corrales. So ultimately spent my high school years in Corrales and graduated from Cibola, class of 91.
And I know, having been, I don't know if any of you all have been to Doug's garage, but he has a whole skateboarding studio in there. There's got skateboards hanging from the walls and areas where you can change the wheels and all the components. So tell us this early love of skateboarding. When did this happen? How did this all come together?
Well, the way I like to describe juvenile Doug is there's pre-puberty Doug and then there's post-puberty Doug. Pre-puberty Doug was a good kid. He was athletic. He was, did pretty well in school. Was, for the most part, pretty good to his parents. Post-puberty Doug was a total shit show. And so, but a big part of that was skateboarding as a young teenager became a huge part of my life. And you're right, I'd be willing to bet the biggest collection of skateboard decks in all of New Mexico. I mean, we're talking collector's items and just lots of cool skateboard decks. And skateboarding really taught me two things that I use even today. One in my, we'll just call it intellectual life, and then one in my physical life. So intellectually, skateboarding taught me to have a healthy skepticism of authority. Mm-hmm. You can imagine as a teenager that could boil over and turn into some things that maybe aren't so pleasant. But honestly, I think without that skateboarder attitude of don't tell me what to do, I don't think I would have become an entrepreneur. The second thing it taught me, which has bode very well in my athletic endeavors, is when you skateboard, you crash constantly. You crash a gazillion times. You watch YouTube videos of those skaters landing tricks. There were 1,000 nasty wipeouts leading up to that landing that trick. And what that taught me is, to this day, I can drop, tuck, and roll like nobody's business, because I'm still very athletic, this time skiing and mountain biking. And up until last year, I had never broken a bone, despite my athletic endeavors. And last year, I broke my collarbone, and I did it because I was riding on tramway, and I was on my gravel bike, and I keep my phone right here on my stem. And I'm a multitasker. I'm just constantly thinking, and so I was checking email, and I was just doing this. I hit some road debris and went down hard. Anyway, sorry. That's probably too much information for skateboarding.
Well, there's some really creative, analogy between crashing a lot in skateboarding and being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
There's
pick yourself up, dust yourself off,
and
get after it.
Failure is part of the gig, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to fall.
Yeah.
And it's about,
you're gonna fall hard.
You're going to fall hard.
Yeah.
And it's up and down.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't want to fast forward yet to
okay.
Doug as founder, but so you're here in Albuquerque, you're moving around, you've picked up skateboarding, and you decide to go to UNM.
Eventually.
So tell us about why UNM, what that process was. You have this healthy skepticism for authority, but you decide to go to UNM and study engineering. But walk us through how that all.
Well, you missed about a decade.
Yeah,
so
tell
I was a very untraditional student, I think, and I was untraditional for a couple of reasons. So one, back to remember post-puberty Doug being a shit show. So somehow miraculously graduate from Cibola. I have no idea why they handed me a diploma, because I was certainly not in a position to enter into a four-year university. And so honestly, I worked. And I worked, again, a lesson for success in being an entrepreneur. I worked in restaurants here in Albuquerque for a decade. For those of you who remember Garduño's, I started off as a busboy at Garduño's and then eventually worked my way up into some higher-end establishments. That's where I learned to public speak. Because, being a server, eventually I ended up at some nice restaurants where you would have to address an entire room full of doctors who were there for a catered meal from a pharmacy rep. And you have to address, hey, this is your menu. This is how the night's going to go down. Da-da-da-da-da. Any questions? Okay. And some of these people are jerks. And guess what? That's life, right? Dealing with jerks. So I did that for a couple of years. But one of the things that was real notable in my life was that when I graduated high school, well, first of all, I was kicked out of the house, rightfully so. I deserved it. But I was gifted something, and that something was a mountain bike. And that mountain bike turned into two things. It turned into my recreation, but also turned into my transportation because I did not have a car. So even to this day, I know how to bike around the city. I know all the funky little routes. So, and since I've moved back, they've all kind of come back. And a few of them have been built over. And so that bike, suddenly I found out I'm actually kind of good at this. And the competitive spirit started to come out at me. And so I started racing mountain bikes here in New Mexico. In my first season as a mountain bike racer, I went from beginner class all the way to expert class. I just blazed through the ranks, and I just got better. Started racing regionally, and then eventually turned pro. Got my pro license, and during that, I was starting to dabble in school. I went to TVI. It was CNM. It was called TVI at the time. Dabbled in school a little bit, and then I guess to kind of fast forward through the pro career. This was the late 90s, so I got pretty high, pretty well nationally ranked here in the U.S. At the time, Americans weren't really racing anything but the national race series. There was a World Cup, but doping was really bad. I mean, we've all heard of Lance Armstrong, and it really took over mountain biking. And so Americans actually just didn't even bother racing World Cups because they knew that it just wasn't a level playing field. Whereas in America, by and large, maybe with the exception of the Canadians, we were all pretty clean because there just wasn't a lot of money. So what was the point? Well, I sort of get why Tour de Francers will dope because there's a multi-million-dollar contract at the end of it. That's not the case for being a domestic mountain biker, so it just never made sense. But I also realized, oh man, this is going to be a tough way to make a living. Maybe I should go to school. Maybe I should take that more serious. And I went into engineering for no other reason than I had a bunch of uncles who were engineers, and my mom was an engineer. Huh. She got her degree at UNM in civil engineering. Wow. And so I said, well, I'll do what my mom did.
And classes, so you show up at UNM, you've gotten into mountain biking, you're there because you'd like to make a little bit of money. Eventually. What classes are you liking? Tell us, is there anything that any professor or any subject, anything that you said, well, that's kind of cool. I might do something in that space.
Well, I would say, so first of all, I had a wonderful time. UNM was a fantastic, it was fantastic for me. I went into civil engineering. The classes were super small. You really got to know the professors. And I say that, I think, in contrast to a lot of the bigger schools. I mentor a lot of kids. In fact, I was talking to this gal who got an engineering degree from Columbia. And she was kind of explaining, professors, they don't really take you under their wing. They sure did at UNM. And so my story is this, and actually I'm going to loop this back with skateboarding. So I get my bachelor's. I get all the way through, or I get towards the end of my bachelor's in civil engineering, and I suddenly realize, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be a civil engineer. And so I went down and I sat with a professor who I just had a ton of respect, and this guy's name is Dr. Gerald May. And I said, Dr. May, I'm just not feeling this civil engineering thing. And he said, I get it. He could see that I was a little kind of crazy. And he was like, I get it, in his very calm way, I get it. Go to grad school. You'll figure it out. You can go in a different direction. To fast forward a little bit, I had the opportunity just a couple of years ago to endow and name the civil engineering department at the University of New Mexico, and it is now called the Gerald May Department of, Fernando, help me out here, Civil Construction Environmental Engineering.
That's amazing.
Named it after Dr. May.
That's amazing.
And I didn't realize it at the time, but one of my favorite places to skateboard was on the campus of the University of New Mexico, because we didn't have skate parks, back in the late 80s, early 90s. We had to go and just skate whatever was around. And skateboarding at UNM was I don't know how to call it illegal, but it was frowned upon. And so we would skate up until the UNM cops would show up, and then, because we were punk-ass skaters, we'd run. And I finally did the math, and I realized, So Dr. Jerry May, at the time I caught him, he was at the tail end of his career. He was, quote unquote, just a professor. Well, Dr. May is a legend at the University of New Mexico. He has, at one time, he was the president of the school. He was the president at the University of New Mexico when I was getting chased off campus. So literally, Dr. May's cops were chasing me off campus. No hard feelings, because we named the department after him.
I mean, you know, what's so interesting, Doug, is like you still have this today, for folks to know you, this sort of healthy reverence, right? For orthodoxy, for the rules, for people,
formality.
For formality.
Look at the difference in the way we're dressed.
I mean, geez. And usually he's in flip-flops. This is formal.
I dressed up for you guys.
This is formal. Yet
I have a collar.
On the other hand, this unbelievable amount of respect for mentors. You do
Absolutely.
a lot of mentorship,
Absolutely.
and you're talking about a mentor who you endowed after, and also a respect for legacy, right? You've come back to New Mexico,
100%.
and you've come back to UNM. So help me square this. There's irreverence, there's punk-ass Doug running away from cops, and then there's mentors that shaped me.
Well, I would argue it's just like in business. There are, you know, we all hear about the 80-20 rule. You know, it's 20% of the people that do 80% of the work. And I think that's actually accurate. And so, you know, so there's almost like this disdain for, you know, in the startup world, we call it dead weight or things like that. Things that just don't make sense. Like, why are we doing that? How does that impact the bottom line? But then on the flip side, enormous amounts of respect for people who are just knocking it out of the park and swinging for the fences.
Yeah.
And so you're right. It is this sort of dual.
I mean, it's dual. It's what's, I think, made you a really good businessman and leader. It's also this element of lifelong learning. I mean, even in our escapades here at Roadrunner, you're like excited about a new idea, whether it be microplastics or something, in a very quick succession. You love learning new things. And maybe we'll touch on that. But also, Doug, loyalty. Like there is
100%.
There is an element.
100%.
The folks that work for you, the folks that are in your corner, the companies that you're in, you're 100% behind.
Yep.
Which I think is really special.
Yeah.
And I think
I hear from former employees all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm always there for them.
Okay, so we have this picture of you at UNM. You are at school. You found a mentor. You're starting to dig in. You're not sure whether really what you want to do. You're being pushed to go to grad school. So where
advised,
right? Skateboarder isn't pushed to do anything. He's on his own accord.
Exactly.
But okay, so where do you go to grad school? What do you study? Tell us about that next step.
Yeah, so I stayed at UNM, and I hooked up with a phenomenal advisor, Roop Maji, who at the time he had a dual appointment. So he was a professor in the civil engineering department at the University of New Mexico, but he was also a scientist at the Air Force Research Laboratory, specifically at the Space Vehicles Directorate. And so really, that's what I became. I did all my research at the Air Force Research Lab. I was on base constantly. I only went to UNM for classes. That was it. And I loved it. I said, aerospace, this is what I want to do. In my case, I focused in on the failure mechanics of composite materials. That doesn't really matter because I'm also a really crappy engineer. Sort of like a close enough engineer, which you don't really want that. That and brain surgery.
Especially in aerospace.
Especially in aerospace. I'm like, yeah, that's good enough.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the next problem.
Boeing's got enough of those folks. Who don't know,
So blazed through. I got a master's in a year with a thesis. I would not recommend that. That actually kind of sucked. I wish I had slowed down a little bit. But once I left my pro bike racing career behind, I was ready to move on to the next thing. And to me, school was just a means to an end. I wanted to get into industry. And so there was a company that was loosely affiliated with my research, and they recruited me up to the Denver Boulder area. And so in 2002, I left New Mexico. It was a little bittersweet because I'd spent my whole life here. But I knew that I needed to explore new opportunities.
Was it hard? New place? You've been here your whole life? You're this New Mexico kid?
I mean, you leave the chili behind. I mean, Colorado talks about chili, but their chili sucks. Their salsa sucks.
But in general, you adjusted. It was.
I adjusted.
Yeah.
I adjusted.
And we're getting some of the seeds of what will become Rocore here.
Correct.
So what's this company called, and what are you doing day to day?
Yeah, so I joined a company. It doesn't really matter what it was called. I basically, my career where I worked for someone else only spanned 9 years. So from 2002 to 2011, I worked for these companies that in our world, we call them SBIR mills. So SBIR is this program called Small Business Innovation Research, where small businesses can compete on various grants and contracts from DOE, NASA, DOD, et cetera. The reason I call them SBIR mills is, unfortunately, a little cottage industry has developed around that program where they don't really, all they do is SBIR. They don't ever really do what the program is intended to do, which is sort of seed money, then move into the commercial marketplace. They just sort of rinse and repeat. And I did that for 9 years, and it was actually, I don't regret it, because I almost had this buffet approach to all kinds of different applications. I mean, I worked on everything from composite-based space deployables, which we'll get into when we talk about Rocore. I worked on composites for U.S. Navy. I worked on, at the time, unmanned aerial UAVs were just new. I worked on things like that. I worked on thermal dissipation materials, just all kinds of stuff. And it was great because I got this broad waterfront kind of schooling. And they were all based on real-world applications. But at the end of that 9-year tenure, it suddenly dawned on me, like, this is very unsatisfying. We're not really doing anything. Like, we do phase 1, phase 2, here's your report, rinse and repeat. And I just found that incredibly unsatisfying. And at one point, I just said, to heck with this. After 9 years of doing that, I certainly knew how to raise funds out of the federal government. I'm going to go into business for myself.
There's this debate in early stage development of folks about whether the best experiences for building CEOs, founders, is to have a very generalist experience first. Then there's the opposite, which is maybe the path I had at investment banking, which is to go very deep.
Yep.
Right, to become the expert in industrials or energy, and to work 100 hours a week thinking about this one thing and learning that technical skill set. I mean, especially with who we have here. I mean, talk a little bit about, I know we haven't fast forwarded yet to what you build, but you had a notably generalist experience where you
very much
could
so.
pick, you said, a buffet of different things that you could work on. Do you think that was critical to where you were headed?
I do, because it just gave me a lot of exposure to a lot of different technologies, a lot of different applications, a lot of different markets. And I mean, even to this day, I was sitting down with a professor just a couple of weeks ago at the University of Colorado, because he's thinking about wanting to create a spin-out company, and he was explaining what he does, which are these acoustic-based tools for literally picking up individual cells. And I'm like, but it's in a fluid. And immediately I said, oh, you're using cavitation. And he said, oh, you're an engineer. And how do I know about cavitation? Because I worked on composites for U.S. Navy vessels.
Yeah.
And I did a relative deep dive on cavitation and what it can do to structures and materials.
And it's so valuable. So it was so much in deep tech and frontier tech. Like, there's so many folks that focus so narrowly.
Yeah.
But the real creativity is like, what can I pull from composites and bring in from civil engineering? And I think that's a pretty instrumental part of where you're headed.
Yeah.
Okay, you skip past, I think, a really a big decision, which is starting your own thing is hard.
Yeah.
We have folks in the audience, I'm looking at one right now, who left a perfectly good paying job with a lot of job security to go build something new. Walk us through, okay, you had a burning desire, you said, I'm bored, we're not really doing anything, but were there folks in your ear saying, Doug, what are you doing? You're crazy?
No.
What were those for you? Like, walk us through the decision, the first few days. Do you remember quitting? What feelings?
Oh, yeah, damn right I remember quitting. The day I quit was the day I filed for my first startup with the Colorado Secretary of State.
Awesome.
And I got the domain name, which is a big deal, by the way. And so the decision, I mean, it was a simple one. It was, I will say this, I underestimated how difficult it is to start from literally ground zero. Yeah. I did, recognizing that I didn't really have anything to step into. I had one thing. I had an individual who eventually became my co-founder for my aerospace company who had an office. And he let me hang out at the office. So because having a place to come, Adam won't bring this up, but I don't really work here at Roadrunner. I'm an advisor, which means nothing.
Oh, no, Doug.
But when I'm in town, I'm always here. Because I like hanging out here, and there's free snacks. And, if his people would give me a heads up, I would have known that there was a free lunch today. So anyway, I had a place that was very important to me. I had a place populated with people, and that was important because I need to brainstorm with people. I'm a brainstormer. Hey, I got this crazy idea. I'm gonna bounce it off you, and you're gonna poke holes in it left and right, and then I'm gonna defend the idea, and then I'm gonna pivot on the idea, and I just need that. I need to have that kind of interaction. So I had that. And I had what I thought was a consulting gig to keep the lights on for a little bit, but that kind of fizzled out. And so, it was very stressful, draining through savings.
Yeah.
But I will say, persistence. Just keep at it. There's definitely some low points. I lost some co-founders that just couldn't stick with it. It was just, this is too risky. I don't want to do it anymore. But just never wavered.
In community, and that word sometimes is, touchy-feely, but really, I think when we think about what it means to be young professional, what it means to be what you'll be a future founder, community is a critical element. I mean, and you and I exist.
It's why we're doing this
completely.
Is to create our community here in Albuquerque around tech startups.
I mean, that's why you and I are so excited about having an office space here. That's why you're here.
That's why I'm here all the time. That's why I'm mooching off your snacks all the time.
Totally. I mean,
By the way, they're back there.
It's true. I used to have a person I used to work with when I worked at Schmidt Futures. It used to say your highest ROI is your pizza budget.
Absolutely.
And it's just buy a bunch of pizza, bring folks to the office, bring experts, bring scientists, bring people that are down the street, bring the businesses to the left and right to you, but have a pizza budget.
Yep.
And bring those collisions.
Yep.
And bring people to the office for the pizza budget. And I think it's interesting. We're trying to do that here in Albuquerque. You're trying to do that with your podcast, with a lot of the mentorship you're doing. We're trying to do that in this campus that we're building.
Yep.
Okay, so you've got this place. You're brainstorming with people. You've run through a couple of co-founders. You're burning through savings. Where's the inflection point happening? Do you raise capital? Do you finally catch traction on one idea?
So
where does this...
The inflection point was really two things. One, so the aerospace company, the going in mission was that I know how to raise money out of the federal government through this thing called SBIR, but we're going to do with the program what it was intended to do, which is play through it. In other words, use the government's money to help develop minimum viable products and then turn around and sell it into the marketplace and actually generate real commercial revenues.
Yeah.
And so we did it. Took a little longer than we expected, but we did that. And that inflection point, I think we went like 0 for 10, 0 for 12 on proposals, but then they started dropping. And and then we started getting out in the community, in the defense and intelligence community, and hey, this is what we're doing, and so on and so forth, and then it just, success begets success, and that flywheel slowly gets going.
And let me ask you, because a lot of founders use SBIRs.
Yep.
And they're a double-edged sword, right?
They are.
And you and I have chatted about this,
They're
right? A lot of
very
people,
much a double-edged sword.
A lot of people go chasing SBIRs and broadly grant money when it may not be on your product roadmap.
Yep.
And it can lead you astray.
Right.
Right. You have to have a vision for a company.
Don't chase the money.
And don't chase the money. I had a really good mentor when I was building a post-quantum encryption company. Used to tell me the worst thing for a early entrepreneur is a profitable distraction. Where you have a view of like, hey, I'm going to go build X in the world, but there's this little thing over here where I can make a couple $100,000 doing this, but it's not actually my business.
Right. Next thing you know, you got a lifestyle business on your hands.
Exactly. Next thing you know, you're a Sibber mill.
Yeah.
I mean, so did you actually, when you say the inflection point was you went from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3 of the Sibber?
Correct.
And ultimately you sold to the government, or was it actually that you used a Sibber as a demand signal that maybe there's a market here, and then you sold to private to customers outside of the government?
It was a little bit of both, and honestly, this is all so fresh in my mind because the gentleman who I handed over the CEO role to was just featured on a podcast hosted by Dan Caruso. It literally just dropped. I listened to it on my ride this morning. My former assistant gave me a heads up. So Dan Caruso, I think a billionaire up in the Boulder area, has a podcast called The Bear Roars, and he had my friend and colleague Chris Pearson on there, and he talked about the early days of Roadrunner, and it was a little bit of both. I mean, so when Adam says phase 1, phase 2, that's R&D dollars from the federal government.
Right.
But then you said phase 3. That's not R&D dollars. That is, you are getting into an acquisition program. So some program manager, program director says, I want that product for my mission. I'm going to buy it. Yes, we did that. It took a while to get into those programs. But the other big hit for us, and this is kind of relevant for the here and now, is just the explosion in these large constellations of small LEO, we call them, low Earth orbit satellites. And so you think, well, what is that? Starlink. That's what Starlink is. It's a constellation of, think, refrigerator-sized satellites, thousands of them, all working in concert to give you worldwide coverage of broadband internet. Well, we were a supplier into a competitor to that called OneWeb. And ultimately, that wasn't it's not like that program was just, phenomenally great long-term, but initially we were very creative about working the cash terms. Because at Roadrunner, we never raised venture dollars. We bootstrapped that company 100%. And I was listening to Chris talk about this literally this morning about the cash crunch issues because Roadrunner took off. I mean, we were a 100-person company. He actually got the number wrong. He said 75,000. We had a $750,000 line of credit backed by my house, and our payroll per month was about that amount. So you can imagine how cash flow became a huge, huge issue. And yes, we were on a growth trajectory like that. But remember, these guys are paying you on net 30, net 45 terms. And employees don't give a crap about net 30 and net 45. They want their paycheck when it's payday.
Yeah. And during this time, I mean, this is a huge scale up. We went from, you're sort of iterating on SIBRs, and then you make it to phase 1 and 2, and then you got a program of record, and you're scaling the business. What are some of the challenges you're facing?
Did I mention cash?
You told us about cash, but what about the people? I mean, I think about my own experience, like building teams, managing teams.
I had a lot of help.
These are hard.
I had a lot of help. I mean, one of the, Roadrunner was a company that was really, it was founded as a people-first company. So in other words, I was far enough in my career that, and I would encourage all of you as you go through your career, you work with people and you're like, oh, you're good. You're real, okay. Oh, and you're good. Okay. 5 years from now, I'm going to start my own company. Hey, you should join me. You should join me. That's essentially what we did.
How do you do it? A lot of people, I mean,
a lot of arm twisting.
Give me an example. You got folks, many of the most talented people are working in perfectly good jobs.
Equity.
You've got a company who's going to cash crunch every month.
Equity.
How are you convincing them? Equity. So you're going to them and you're saying, I'm going to give you...
So some advice to the audience.
Yeah.
You don't get rich through your paycheck. You get rich through equity.
Well said. Well said.
And that's, so as a founder of a startup, you may not have cash, but you have this magical thing called equity, and that has no limit on the upside. No limit.
And Doug, can you recall a moment where you really felt like I found product market fit, or I'm over the hump? We have a real business. I've got a tiger by the tail here. When did that happen? At what point in the company? What was the moment where you sat in your office and said, I actually have a company and it's going to make it, and it might actually be something in the world? It
was when I stepped down as CEO at the end of 2018.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Well, because we haven't even gotten to the other company that I'm mostly known for.
That's right. No, we haven't. So that's amazing. So not until you stepped down did you feel that sense of relief.
Well, because I was running two companies, and I'm like,
Yeah.
hey, this one's actually pretty good. I don't think this one needs me anymore, but this one needs me.
By the way, what a great what a great anecdote, maybe to every CEO and founder at some level. You don't feel the relief until you're out of the seat, right? Like it every day it gyrates from, am I going bankrupt? Is this $1 billion company? Am I
The
going
cash
bankrupt?
issue didn't go away.
Yeah. So in retrospect,
but the revenue growth was
would you have
was
raised
this.
venture capital
Never.
in retrospect?
Never.
Okay.
And that was by design. Sorry, guys.
No, I mean some businesses are.
Remember, I have another company where I did raise a lot of venture.
So let's talk about that. So you're running Rocore, things are going pretty well. You still have this cash crunch, but how only Elon Musk starts two companies at once. Like what? How did this happen?
Yeah, so I started two companies at once. So parallel with Rocore, I founded a company. There was some DARPA-funded research at the University of Colorado on next-generation batteries. So got connected to a couple professors in the mechanical engineering department up at CU Boulder. And, they wanted to create a spin-out company. And I'm like, okay, this is kind of cool. I inherited this group at my last SBIRML doing lithium-ion batteries. And I kid you not, I hated chemistry in school. And when they said, oh, you're running this lithium-ion battery group, I'm like, batteries? What the hell do I know about batteries? I kid you not, I went to the Wikipedia page for lithium-ion, and I was like, okay, anode, cathode, ions. Okay, I got this.
and this is, I'm trying to think of the timeline here. So you already have Rocore by this point?
They were founded roughly around the same time.
How is that possible?
They lived together.
But how are you spending your time? Companies you're spending half your time and half your time?
Whatever's needed. And remember, being an entrepreneur is a 24-hour job. So,
different teams, overlapping
completely
teams?
different teams. We did share a little bit of back office support, so finance, admin, HR, they kind of shared that for a while. But eventually, and even shared, we were in the same facility until the end of 2016.
That's amazing.
So it was kind of funny because we would joke, we would bring in all these, we brought BMW into that facility, and we would give facility tours, and we'd end up looking at all the space tech because it was big and it was cool looking, and they'd be like, whoa, what is that? I'd be like, oh, great question, let me show you.
And same pathway? Did you use SIBRs and government demand signals?
Little bit.
What's the story? Tell us the story of Solid Power.
Yeah, so Solid Power launched much quicker. And again, the idea was, in this case, we're going to use what we call non-dilutive capital, so federal grants and contracts. We'll use it to de-risk. Because eventually we knew we were going to have to pitch this to a venture company. Unlike what we did with the space company, you can't bootstrap a battery company, not batteries for electric vehicles. Because as we later learned, that literally takes $1 billion.
Yeah.
And so the strategy there was to de-risk it, take a couple years, show that the tech is proven, and then go out to the venture community and say, okay, here's what the tech can actually do.
Can you talk more about that? So you had a very visceral reaction to raising capital for Rocore. Never. On Solid Power, it was, by your own language, sort of obvious to do it.
Yeah.
But tell us more about why some businesses it's obvious to have VC capital, and in some businesses why not? How should people think about
scale?
Okay.
Scale. EV manufacturing of lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles is massive.
But wouldn't somebody say the same for composites of space vehicles?
No.
They're both capital intensive, aren't they?
You're talking a satellite this big, you're talking a solar array this big.
But how'd you know? Were you able to know how much capital you would need ahead of time?
No. For the battery company, all I knew is this is going to take a lot of capital. But yeah, we knew we could get to an MVP, minimum viable product, with a couple $1 million, all from the federal government.
And if I'm sitting in your shoes, I'm thinking, well, I have some technical insight, right? We're doing something different. That's some performance difference. Many early stage companies get this fork in the road.
Yep.
Of I can sell the IP and do what I'll call almost a quick flip. I got it. I got something. I can sell this.
Yep.
Be done. Or I can try to vertically integrate and raise a ton of capital.
Yep.
And build this massive company. But there's a lot of risk in keeping down this road.
Yep.
Why didn't you just sell to a BMW, sell to a battery maker?
Oh, so the whole time you're asking that question, I'm thinking of the space company, because we could have done that.
Well, answer it for both. Why build out the company? Why not? You got it. You got
Tech's
something.
too early stage, too unproven. Battery space is littered with lots of over promises, under delivery. So the barrier to entry to a BMW is very, very high. Demonstrate performance at scale, manufacturability, all of those things.
I'm told we should start moving through the.
Yeah, so let's go.
Sorry, you're too interesting.
Pedal to the metal.
Okay, so but Solid Power, and then I'm going to move to coming back to New Mexico. But
yeah,
Solid Power is this amazing story.
Wild
right?
ride.
You took this company public. Walk us through. You've mentioned BMW a few times.
Yep.
Walk us through how you got the attention of some of these large auto manufacturers, some of the best in the world, to pay attention.
Yeah.
And then walk us through this wild journey of going public. What happened? What lessons learned?
Yeah.
You went public via SPAC. That's a different vehicle. Not everybody is familiar, but reflect on that chapter of.
So at the end of the day, a lot of success. Any entrepreneur who doesn't say this is either full of crap or lying. A lot of it's just luck. Right time, right place. We were riding the electrification boom of the 2010s, and we were right. Again, obviously hindsight now, because the winds have kind of come out of the electric vehicle market sales a bit. But in the 2015 to 2020 timeframe, the entire world's OEMs were like, oh shoot, our entire value proposition has been tied up in this, in this transmission and engine, and all that gets replaced by this magic box that's produced by LG or CATL or somebody like that. Oh crap, do we need to get smart, and do we need to develop tech, and do we need to develop capabilities like yesterday? What's the best way to do that? Partner with a startup. And so very quickly we were able to get BMW on board, we were able to get Ford on board. We worked very closely with Hyundai, we worked very closely with Samsung, and then eventually SK became our main cell partner. So right time, right place. We rode the venture wave through that. My Series A was about 35 million. My Series B was 250 million. And then 9 months after Series B, and then the SPAC market became very, very frothy.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know what a SPAC is, it's a form of going public that's called a reverse merger. So in other words, someone else goes public. They're called a blank check vehicle, so they have money. They then go and merge with another company that has a compelling story. And so we did, and I mean, they loved us with the partnerships with the auto OEMs, et cetera. And so we went public in December of 2021. We had virtually no redemptions as part of that process, and so we dumped about almost $600 million onto the company's balance sheet.
And then, Doug, I mean, you have this wild ride. You take this company public. There's so much tailwinds behind batteries at that point, and then you step down.
It got boring.
No, I mean,
it did get boring.
So start another company. Well, there's so many. Then get a hobby. Then go.
I was also
biking.
tired of sitting in traffic on I-70 to go skiing. I'm a big skier. I'm a big mountain biker, and I want to come back to New Mexico. It comes back to the loyalty thing. This is home.
So tell us about that. So you're, born and raised here, went to school here, found some mentors here, left to Colorado to build your businesses. When did you start thinking about coming to New Mexico? Or was it always in the back of your head that you would return?
It was always there. The opportunity didn't present itself until I took my last company public.
And what's it been like coming back?
Well, there's some pros and cons. I'm unique in the sense that I'm from here, so all the cultural stuff is very familiar, but I didn't build my career here. I built my career outside, and even though I built it in Colorado, I really built it internationally. And so I saw some big stuff, and I saw, I learned about, corporate culture in Europe and in Japan and South Korea and how they do things. And so, my eyes have been open, and then I come back to New Mexico, and I'm like, why do you guys do it like that? That doesn't make any sense. And so that's kind of like what I'm doing now, is going around being like, I wouldn't do that. I would do that differently.
And give me what's missing and what's the opportunity? You've spent some time here. You're in a lot of conversations with me about this. Like, what's missing? What's the opportunity for the state? Okay,
so to boil it down into real simple terms, I look at New Mexico, and obviously the authenticism. salt of the earth people. Everyone's, the accessibility is ridiculous. How many different people did we run into at Villa Miriam Coffee this morning?
Yep.
And all influential people in the community. It's just crazy. You're not going to do that in Denver. It's just not going to happen. But I look around and I'm like, okay, we in comparison to our neighboring states, I'm just going to say it, we're economically stagnant. And I think the reason we're economically stagnant here is this historic over-reliance on public sector jobs. And so the private sector, relative to where I come from, has been weak. Okay, I'm not Jim Long. I'm not going to come in here and start, hospitality empire. I'm just this guy who knows tech startups. So that's why I showed up at your doorstep is, hey, what can I do? Let's grow the tech startup scene here because we have the pieces. If you think about a robust tech startup ecosystem like I came up through, it's akin to a three-legged stool. We have two of the three legs. Those two legs are, one, you got to have lots of R&D. There's got to be lots of great ideas. I'm convinced behind the gates of Sandia, Los Alamos, and here at UNM, there's a gazillion future companies over there because just the billions of dollars of R&D here. What else do we have here? Money. The New Mexico SIC has deployed billions of dollars into early stage venture capital. And those guys are walking around, as you know, very much so, with this term about cause to invest here in the state of New Mexico. However, I know they get a lot of criticisms because they don't make a lot of investments in the state. Well, the reason is we just don't have a lot of good investable companies. And that gets to the third leg of the stool that is missing here and that we're trying to build, and that is a robust ecosystem sitting there with a catcher's mitt on right outside the doors of these labs. And that ecosystem is made up of, in part, entrepreneurs who have been there and done that. And that's a lot of what we're lacking here. And that's what we, all of us, are trying to build here. Really to make New Mexico a better place.
Well said. To close us out, and we're going to open up for some questions from the audience. As I hear your journey, there's this element of right place, right time. There's this element of, you identified there were these moments where you built companies where there were lots of tailwinds, whether it be Leo or whether it be batteries. And so many folks, I think, wonder whether people who have had tremendous success, whether that was premeditated. You had the thesis figured out. You knew Leo was exploding. You knew the batteries.
No.
Or is it opportunistic? Maybe help elucidate as we move to questions from the audience here. How should people think about their careers? Is it at every junction I should be reevaluating, or is it have a couple North Stars, execute on these tailwinds? Like, how premeditated was this all, and what advice do you have for
Well,
folks
I would
about
say, so North Star, values and ethics. I mean, again, I'm a karma kind of guy. Just do right by others, and that will pay dividends. So you've got to have your North Star. But for those of you who are early career, I wouldn't overthink it. I would think of your career in terms of a few years here or there. Don't, 10 years, 20 years from now, because you have no idea. Opportunities are going to present themselves, and your life and your career is a series of pivots. That's what it is. And pivot opportunities present themselves. You've got to jump. And also remember, not acting is also making a decision. So,
yeah, well said. Well, we have a group here, Young Professionals of Albuquerque, and I think we have a traveling mic. So let's get
and
a
please
couple
use the mic
questions.
because we want to get this picked up.
Yes.
And the only way we pick it up is through the
Yes.
speakers.
So let's see. Let's take a couple questions from the audience for Doug.
Before we do the Q&A portion
Or Adam.
of the event, can we give a quick round of applause?
Good job. Well done.
We'll open it up for Q&A. Hi, sir. Thank you for speaking. I was curious.
What's your name?
Alfred.
Are you with anybody?
No, I just kind of showed up.
Okay. Alfred kind of showed up.
You talked about equity, so I was curious if you were trying to, if you were pitching, like, would you like to buy equity in my company or somebody, how would that go?
Okay, well, so different context. So when I brought up equity, it was more around, like, let's say, for example, I'm trying to recruit you to join my company. I don't have a lot of money to give you, but what I do have is equity in my company to give you as a key employee that I would like to join. But your question was different. Your question was in exchange for money. Am I getting that right?
I guess my question had to do more with shares, but like, I guess it makes more sense what you were saying. If you were trying to recruit somebody and you wanted to incentivize them to get a job, you also own part of the company.
We call it skin in the game. Skin in the game. It is the most powerful thing.
Thank you.
Okay.
But can I add a question to Alfred? I mean, it's hard to figure out how much to give people. This is your company. You're constantly, what advice? How do you think about, should Alfred be giving 10% to somebody to join, 5%? How do you think about who to give equity to?
Well, so first of all, you need to talk with your network. You need to, hey, what have you done? What's kind of, we call it what's market. But the one thing I always encourage entrepreneurs is don't get too hung up on your slice of the pie, because this is really about making the pie, the whole pie, a lot bigger. And then your slice of the pie becomes quite meaningful. Because you may have the whole pie, but if you don't monetize it, who cares?
Well said.
Also, you mentioned how you were like almost homeless. What was that?
I never said that. I slept on my uncle's couch for a month. That's the closest I got to homeless.
You mentioned I have collateral against my house that I'm using to fund my business.
Oh.
Which is the cost of payroll.
Yeah.
So, like, if you don't make any money, they repossess your house.
Yeah, that was a possibility.
Did I never cross my mind?
Oh, you damn right it did. But I always had a high degree of confidence in my financial team, and I knew this is just a bridge loan, and so on and so forth.
Looks like we got one over there.
This is Adrian Smart. I actually work with the New Mexico Angels.
Oh, I know you. I get emails from you all the time.
I'm curious, when do you think, if a company is going to raise venture capital, is the right time for them to raise capital? Is it when they have a minimum viable product? Is it pre-seed?
I think, and actually I'm going to have Adam give his answer as well. I think it's when you hit a position of it's less technical risk and now it's more speed risk. If you don't move faster, a window of opportunity is going to close. That's when I think you need to get serious about raising venture dollars.
Yeah, I'd echo. I mean, I think what Doug pointed to, the way to think about when to raise money in a business is to think about the key milestones when the risk is being bought down. When the risk is less for an investor, your company is worth more. And so what's really savvy founders do is think about, is it when I develop the first product? Is it when I get that customer who's paying? Like, what are those milestones where the company is just less risky? And in those moments, you can raise the most capital and keep the most equity for you and your team. That's the critical elements of raising money in a business.
Yeah, but I think just remember, the earlier you raise money, the more expensive that money is.
My name is Jessie. I'm head of school at Bosque School.
And a former podcast guest.
And a former podcast guest. Thanks so much. So my question is, as you envision New Mexico as a potential opportunity for innovation, for entrepreneurship, for startups, if you could paint the picture of educating the next generation, so let's say middle school and high schoolers of today that are living in New Mexico, to encourage and prepare them to contribute as the next generation to New Mexico taking off as a startup hub, what would that look like?
It would look like messaging and awareness, and where the rubber would hit the road would be things like, and I'm just speaking hypothetically here, but maybe going to a local independent school, maybe it's called Bosque School, and serving on their Shark Tank panel and talking about what it's like to do tech startups. Similarly, and again, speaking strictly hypothetical, but maybe participating in a panel at the University of New Mexico where we talk about what it's like to do venture-backed startups. And oh, by the way, these venture people live right here in the state of New Mexico.
Well said.
Hi, Justina Grant with Holman's USA. Thank you guys for putting this together. I think it's really cool to see a live podcast and in collaboration with YPA. I hope it's going to be done again. I think it's also really cool to see you on this side of the mic of the podcast. And so this might be, I don't want to jump ahead, but I'd like to know what is a memorable or very interesting guest that you've interviewed in the past for your podcast, besides Ms. Jessie.
Okay, so that can't be Jesse. And here's another one of my podcast guests, yeah. Shelley Grunig from R4. I might be stealing some thunder, so I'm not going to call you out, and over there too. And then here's one of my podcasts. So I'm not going to pick these guys. I would say, and I'm going to pick several. Pete Trevisani, owner of New Mexico United. Guy's just got a great attitude, and I really love, he's not from New Mexico, but, his whole reasoning behind starting New Mexico United was to provide purpose for New Mexicans, which I think is fantastic. One of the funner interviews I had was with our former men's basketball coach, Richard Pitino. Mostly because this guy's media trained, and he kind of took control, and I had to wrest control back from him. And if you're savvy and you listen to the interview, you can kind of hear me do that. I think I did a good job. I think I got the wheel back. Hunter Green, former Lobo legend, man of a gazillion different businesses here. He just has a phenomenal background. Micah Gray, young kid, football player from UNM, hearing his story about what he went through with his football experience, both the good and the bad, but also taking those lessons learned into his career that he's still early on in commercial real estate. Some of the out-of-the-box ones, which I'd argue this one is a part of that, was my media partnership down in Silver City with Tour of the Gila. So I got to hang out with a bunch of professional cyclists again and become very self-conscious about how much weight I've gained since I was a professional cyclist. But hearing their stories, and this was more rapid fire. And then, of course, going to said hypothetical school, Bosque School, and interviewing, I think, a dozen students about what leadership is to them. So, yeah. Oh, and then the most recent one, which was Joni Griffin, who is just a force of nature, and then to hear about her family's story of, being German Jews in World War II, and you can imagine that didn't go very pleasantly. So, and to me, that's what's so cool about this podcast, because we grab so many different people, and you just, like with Joni, I'm a good friend with Joni. I didn't know any of that stuff. Like, wow. So that's the fun part, is teasing out all this background.
Thanks everybody for coming out. Quick round of applause for Doug and Adam. Couple things. The podcast publishes every 2 weeks. Take out your phones and subscribe to our newsletter. If you go to leadersoфenchantment.com, you can subscribe to our newsletter. All of our podcast information, episodes are there, and you'll hear more from Doug and other guests that are involved. We've had a really great episode tonight. Thank you all. Thank you all for coming down tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice job.